And now to our exclusive interview with President Barack Obama. We sat down with the president at the White House for a wide-ranging conversation. First up, the economy. After failing to win a single House Republican vote for his stimulus plan, I asked the president if he's worried about his promise to build bipartisanship in Washington.
Oh, listen, it's only been 10 days. People have to recognize that it's going to take some time for trust to be built, not only between Democrats and Republicans, but between Congress and the White House, between the House and the Senate. We've had a dysfunctional political system for a while now.
You were pretty agitated this past week when the news broke of these Wall Street bonuses paid out in 2008, even as some of the firms that paid them out had their hands out looking for federal assistance. Is there an audit underway right now, or can there be an audit that takes place to make sure that none of the taxpayers' money goes to anything but stabilizing these firms?
That's what I've asked my Treasury Secretary to do, to put together a clear set of guidelines. If a bank or a financial institution is getting relief, then they've got to abide by certain conditions.
The American people might worry that the bailout, could be off course, because if the money's going to people who simply are out of touch, it's not a confidence builder.
Right. Well, and that's why it's my job as president and Congress's job to make sure that there's some rules of the road that people are going to abide by, and that we've got transparency and accountability, that this stuff is being posted. And one of the things that we're going to do is put together an independent board on the recovery package that actually looks at these programs and the money before it goes out the door.
It seems like somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 to $350 billion in TARP money has already gone out and been spent. And you're hearing more and more people saying it's going to take much, much more. I'm curious, though, have you heard anyone credible be able to put a real figure on how much it's going to take to fix this? And B, who can say, and this money will work. It will fix the economy.
Here's what I've heard from a range of economists across the political spectrum. The banks, because of mismanagement, because of huge risk-taking, are now in very vulnerable positions. We can expect that we're going to have to do more to shore up the financial system. We also are going to have to make sure that we set up financial regulations so that not only does this never happen again, but you start having some sort of trust in how the credit markets work again. I do have confidence that we're going to be able to get it right, but it's not going to be overnight, and there's no silver bullets to this. The fact of the matter is that we are suffering from a massive hangover from a binge of risk-taking.
And it's still getting worse.
And that's still getting worse, and it's going to take some time for us to be able to dig ourselves out of this hole.
Are you planning in the near future to announce an idea that will buy up the toxic debt from the balance sheets of these banks with perhaps a so-called bad bank? And if so, what do you think that could cost? Because Chuck Schumer came out and said, since we don't really know what those debts are worth, this could cost $4 trillion.
No, we're not going to be spending $4 trillion worth of taxpayer money. It's conceivable that we have more. Not only is it conceivable, it is likely that the banks have not fully acknowledged all the losses that they're going to experience. They're going to have to write down those losses, and some banks won't make it. Other banks are going to make sure that we strengthen. All deposits are going to be safe for ordinary people, but we're going to have to wring out some of these bad assets.
Are you going to set up a bad bank, or whatever it would be called?
I don't want to preempt an announcement next week, and there's a lot of technical aspects to it, and if I say that we're doing one thing, then the markets might interpret it differently from what it ends up being. But the basic principle that we're going to have to see some of this debt written down, that the government is going to have to support some banks, that others that are not viable, essentially, that we're going to have to do something with those assets.
At some point, will you say, wait a minute, we've spent this amount of money, we're not seeing the results, we've got to change course dramatically?
Look, I'm at the start of my administration. One nice thing about the situation I find myself in is that I will be held accountable. I've got 4 years.
You're going to know quickly how people feel about what's happening.
That's exactly right. And a year from now, I think people are going to see that we're starting to make some progress, but there's still going to be some pain out there. If I don't have this done in 3 years, then there's going to be a one-term proposition.
Let me go on quickly, if I can, to some other subjects. You signed an executive order in your first week that says you'll close the military detention center at Guantanamo within a year. So the clock is ticking, and already you've heard the criticism that you don't know what you're going to do with the 245 prisoners being held there.
It's the right thing to do. Ultimately, it will make us safer. You've already seen in the reaction around the world a different sense of America by us taking this action.
Some of these people may be released, the ones that seem to be less of a threat, but if one of those people that's released goes back and takes part in the planning of or carrying out of an attack against U.S. interests, you're going to have a Willie Horton times 100 situation on your hands. How are you going to deal with that?
Of course I'm worried about it. Look, I have to make the very best judgments I can make in terms of what's going to keep the American people safe and is what's going to uphold our Constitution and our traditions of due process. If we don't uphold our Constitution and our values, that over time that will make us less safe, and that will be a recruitment tool for organizations like Al-Qaeda. That's what I've got to keep my eye on.
Let me ask you about Afghanistan. Defense Secretary Robert Gates said this is going to be a long slog and that it's our greatest military challenge. You're going to send 30,000 additional U.S. troops in there. Can that make a difference in a country that's had 2,000 years of trouble and it's been called the graveyard of empires?
We are not going to be able to rebuild Afghanistan into a Jeffersonian democracy.
So what's the mission there now?
What we can do is make sure that Afghanistan is not a safe haven for Al-Qaeda. What we can do is make sure that it is not destabilizing neighboring Pakistan, which has nuclear weapons. The key is we've got to have a clear objective, and there's been drift in Afghanistan over the last couple of years. That's something that we intend